Yang Amat Berhormat Dato Sri Anwar bin Ibrahim, Prime Minister of Malaysia. Keyakinan jadi ikutan, pendirian jiwa ihsan, nilai hormat keras diminda. Ladies and gentlemen, we would like to capture a group photo of Yang Amat Berhormat Dato Sri Anwar Ibrahim together with all of you, our distinguished delegates and guests. We kindly request that everyone remain standing and let's all look towards the cameras on stage as our group photo is being taken to immortalize this most incredible moment. Thank you all. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Kindly all please take your seats, and we also kindly request for all photographers to exit the stage. Yang Amat Berhormat Dato Sri Anwar bin Ibrahim, Prime Minister of Malaysia. Yang Berhormat Senator Datuk Sri Amir Hamzah bin Azizan, Minister of Finance to Malaysia. His Excellency Chee Hong Tat, Minister of Transport and Second Minister of Finance, Singapore. Yang Berhormat Puan Lim Hui Ying, Deputy Minister of Finance, Malaysia. His Excellency Thomas Jiwandono, Deputy Minister of Finance, Indonesia. Yang Berbahagia Dato Sri Abdul Rashid Ghaffur, Governor, Central Bank of Malaysia. Yang Berbahagia Dato Muhammad Faiz Azmi, Chairman, Securities Commission, Malaysia. Board and management of our partners, AFN Group, CGS International, and RHB Banking Group. Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. A very warm welcome to the ASEAN Investment Conference 2025, held on the sidelines of the ASEAN Finance Ministers and Central Bank Governors meeting. This conference is hosted by the Securities Commission Malaysia, SC, in partnership with AFN Group, CGS International, and RHB Banking Group. My name is Tamina Kausji, and on behalf of the organizers, we're absolutely thrilled to have you all here with us today as we come together to explore growth and investment opportunities across ASEAN. With the theme of connecting capital, unlocking opportunities, and driving sustainability, today's conference showcases transformative ideas, bold partnerships, and actionable strategies that bridge finance and innovation to foster growth and resilience. We're honored to have a distinguished lineup of speakers, panelists, and thought leaders who will be sharing insights and experiences throughout this two-day conference. On this note, ladies and gentlemen, it gives us great pleasure to invite Yang Berbahagia Dato Muhammad Faiz Azmi, Executive Chairman of the Securities Commission Malaysia, to deliver his opening address.
Yang Amat Berhormat Datuk Sri Anwar bin Ibrahim, Prime Minister of Malaysia. Yang Berhormat Senator Datuk Sri Amir Hamzah bin Azizan, Minister of Finance to Malaysia. His Excellency Mr. Chee Hong Tat, Minister of Transport and Second Finance Minister of Singapore. Yang Berhormat Puan Lim Hui Ying, Deputy Minister of Finance, Malaysia. His Excellency Thomas Jiwandono, Deputy Minister of Finance, Indonesia. Yang Berbahagia Datuk Sri Abdul Rashid Ghaffur, Governor, Central Bank of Malaysia. Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and a very good morning. So, welcome to the ASEAN Investment Conference 2025. It's indeed a privilege to stand before this assembly of leaders gathered here with a unified vision to enhance ASEAN's investment appeal and to shape the region's future. I would like to extend my sincere gratitude to the Prime Minister of Malaysia, Yang Amat Berhormat Datuk Seri Anwar Ibrahim, for gracing us with his presence and for his commitment to growing Malaysia's and global standing. I'd also like to extend my appreciation to our delegates and speakers who have traveled from near and far to be part of this significant event. Special thanks goes to our strategic partners, AFIN Banking Group, CGS International, and RHB Banking Group for their support in making this conference possible. I'd also like to take this moment to wish everyone Eid Mubarak or Selamat Hari Raya Aidil Fitri. We're still celebrating, particularly for those who are Muslims. Now, today's conference, Connecting Capital, Unlocking Opportunities and Driving Sustainability, embodies ASEAN's commitment to enhance efforts to attract capital and investment flows into the region for our greater prosperity. This is very much aligned with the objectives of the ASEAN Capital Market Forum, ACMF, which the Securities Commission Malaysia is chairing this year. ACMF has played a pivotal role in advancing regional collaboration in terms of enabling greater market access, strengthening cross-border regulatory frameworks, and investment opportunities, as well as promoting sustainable finance. This region's capital markets continue to evolve, offering liquidity, accessibility, and a wide range of investment choice. To put things into perspective, however, the combined market capitalization of ASEAN's listed companies alone exceed US $3 trillion, well, give or take a few percentage points. With more than 4,500 PLCs, this provides significant diversification opportunities for investors. Ladies and gentlemen, over the next 2 days, we hope to showcase the best of ASEAN and why it remains a compelling investment destination. Don't just take it from me and my fellow regional policy makers. Hear it directly from the fund managers, financiers, and companies invested in our economies. Some of them are here this next 2 days to share the insights and perspectives in the upcoming panel sessions. So what is the ASEAN investment case? From a growth perspective, this region's GDP growth has consistently been higher than the global average. In 2025, the ASEAN 5 economies are projected to grow by at least 4.5%, outpacing what was previously forecasted. Now, it may drop a little bit with current events, but the GDP growth is still expected to be very positive. This is also complemented by strong demographic trends, rising consumption, and rapid urbanization. Later, we'll hear key insights on trends, challenges which are impacting ASEAN, as well as the regional investment strategies and economic forecasts. Factors including aging population and a rising middle class are set to influence demand and products and services in all sectors such as healthcare and life sciences, consumer, and even the need for more technology. Additionally, there are emerging growth areas where ASEAN is poised to capture more capital flows. Take, for instance, the green economy. In 2023, private sector green investments in Southeast Asia grew by 20% to $6.3 billion US, up from 5.2 the previous year. So the potential for growth is there. Another important area of focus for the region is inclusivity. On the sidelines of this conference, we'll be launching the ASEAN Investment Challenge 2025. This is an initiative that comprises a trading challenge designed for ASEAN youth. The objective is to enhance their personal financial management skills and investment knowledge, including cross-border trading of ASEAN securities. Governments in the region are also focused on the small and medium-sized SME segment, which has promising growth potential. Efforts include facilitating fundraising and access to SMEs, boosting their contribution to the economic activities. The ASEAN Capital Market Regulators have also produced an ASEAN Simplified ESG Disclosure Guide version 1, which was shared with the Prime Minister last night. Now, this reflects our commitment to assist the smaller businesses to ensure that no one is left behind. Ladies and gentlemen, in closing, the ASEAN story is evolving and is currently being challenged by the shifting global economic environment. So it is actually an opportune time for ASEAN to re-look again as to what we can all do better together and how we can all continue to be prosperous. So with that, it's now my honor to invite the Prime Minister of Malaysia, Yang Amat Berhormat Datuk Seri Anwar Ibrahim, to deliver his keynote address. Thank you, and I hope you have a good conference.
Thank you very much, Yang Berbahagia, for your insightful remarks. Ladies and gentlemen, it is now our great honor to invite Yang Amat Berhormat Dato Sri Anwar bin Ibrahim, Prime Minister of Malaysia, to deliver his keynote address on ASEAN 2025, Forging a Resilient and Inclusive Future.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Salam sejahtera. Menteri Kewangan kedua Malaysia dan Singapura, Timbalan Menteri Saudara Muhammad Faiz dari Suruhanjaya Security, Governor Bengara dan rakan-rakan yang saya muliakan, saya ucapkan tahniah kepada Suruhanjaya Security yang dapat menyelenggarakan satu sidang pelaburan ASEAN yang akan memberikan suatu lonjakan kepada kefahaman kita dan ketersediaan kita dalam menghadapi kemelut ekonomi semasa dan memberikan rangka yang lebih positif harapan dan hala tuju kita. Tentunya kita kegusar dengan perkembangan semasa, tetapi semangat ASEAN itu terlalu kukuh. Dalam perbincangan saya dengan ketua-ketua ASEAN, Perdana Menteri Lawrence di Singapura, Tuanku Sultan Brunei, Presiden Prabowo, Bombo Marcos, Pan Tengton, Thailand, pemimpin Vietnam umpamanya, ada semangat untuk meningkatkan kerjasama perdagangan antara negara-negara ASEAN dan melonjakkan kekuatan ekonomi kita. Now, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, the global trading system is under intense strain, more so than at any point in recent memory. Last week, the United States unveiled its latest turn towards economic nationalism, sweeping tariffs on all imports being part and parcel of what has been dubbed as Trump tariffs against the rest of the world. Malaysia's trade with the United States has long been a model of mutual gain. Our exports support not just growth here, but high-quality jobs across the United States. This commercial relationship has served both countries well, but these measures may end up harming all. Yet, we do not believe in megaphone diplomacy. As part of our soft diplomacy of quiet engagement, and I built this consensus among ASEAN leaders, we will be dispatching, together with our colleagues in ASEAN, our officials in Washington to begin the process of dialogue. There may be limited room to revisit the underlying intent, but there is still scope for adjusting the policy's implementation. In the meantime, Malaysia will adapt as we always have. Winds may shift, but we do not drift. Our trade diversification strategy is already gathering space. Our cohesiveness within ASEAN believes that the intra-trade among ASEAN, investments and joint collaboration must be further enhanced. While we intend to remain steadfast trade partners with the United States, we will in tandem do whatever it takes to safeguard our economic interests. This includes engaging proactively with the United States towards achieving a mutually beneficial outcome, and at the same time, diversifying our ties with all major trade markets across the EU, Asia, Middle East, Africa, and particularly China, Korea, and Japan. Now, these efforts are not occurring in a vacuum. They unfold against a backdrop of mounting uncertainty, one that transcends any single country's policy choices. Globalization, once assumed to be forging ahead, now appears to be in retreat. Protectionism is resurgent. Supply chains are being reconfigured, and multilateralism is increasingly spoken of in the past tense. In this environment, ASEAN stands out as a beacon of hope and positivity. We are still broadly committed to openness, cooperation, and institutional continuity. Our total trade in goods stands at $3.5 trillion. Of course, this figure is not guaranteed. While the barrage of tariffs sweeping across the world in fast and furious fashion we are witnessing the fraying of the global order. Therefore, ASEAN must rely more on itself. This means strengthening inter-ASEAN trade. We must move beyond rhetoric to execution. Tariff liberalization within the region is largely complete, but regulatory alignment, cross-border logistics, digital connectivity remain unfinished business. It also means safeguarding and expanding our external linkages. Our dialogue and sectoral partners span 6 continents. Few regional blocs can claim such a network. As chair this year, Malaysia will prioritize the revitalization of strategic platforms such as the ASEAN Plus 3 as mechanisms for economic resilience. Our vision for ASEAN is a prosperous, sustainable, and inclusive region. This will require political will, serious capital, fortitude, and a strong dose of good fortune. It will also require swift progress in initiatives at the sub-regional level. A key example in this is the Johor-Singapore Special Economic Zone, unprecedented, and it shows the will, courage, commitment of leaders of both countries to decide on policies on a win-win basis and in interest not only of Johor or Malaysia and Singapore, but in the region. While this will not be a silver bullet, it is nevertheless a significant and an unprecedented step. By lowering barriers and coordinating policy between these 2 closely linked economies, we create a demonstration effect, a case study in cross-border economic logic. Malaysia is also committed to invest in developing our border areas, such as in the northern peninsula with Thailand and Sabah and Sarawak border with Kalimantan, to promote economic activities for the benefit of people in both sides of the border, covering Indonesia, Brunei, and the Philippines. Resilience also requires investment in infrastructure that can weather storms, both literal and financial. Our Southeast Asian neighbors are especially prone to natural disasters. Furthermore, the effects of climate change have become more insidious. Our capacity to manage adverse weather events, safeguard critical infrastructure, and protect vulnerable communities must be significantly improved. Green growth is no longer a matter of environmental virtue, but a strategic economic necessity. Technologies such as carbon capture, circular production models, and low-emission innovations are not peripheral experiments. Indeed, they are poised to define the industrial landscape of the coming decade. And then there is the digital economy, a space of both great promise and great inequality. The region's digital transformation is well underway, but uneven. Meantime, the trajectory of artificial intelligence is surging ahead with the speed of lightning. If this asymmetrical digital progress is left unchecked, it risks deepening divides. Investments in digital literacy, infrastructure, empowerment, and governance must go hand in hand. Meanwhile, the small and medium-sized enterprises, which form the bulk of our employment base, yet are often the most exposed to shocks and the least equipped to respond. Compliance with global sustainability standards is daunting for a company of, say, 5 people. That's why Malaysia, with the support of our partners, is launching the ASEAN Simplified ESG Disclosure Guide for SMEs. This is a practical tool to help small businesses take their first step towards more sustainable and transparent operations. It is initiatives like this, concrete and grounded, that will decide whether our vision for ASEAN becomes a reality or fades into a footnote of history. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, at times like this, there is a temptation to retreat into nostalgia or fatalism, to assume that the international order is beyond repair, or that regional cooperation is too slow to matter. But ASEAN has always been a creature of evolution, not revolution. Its strength lies not in drama, but in durability. Our nearly 6 decades, now over 6 decades, it has withstood wars, crises, coup, and still managed to inch forward, often frustratingly, but forward nonetheless. Today, even more pertinent than ever, we must pursue greater economic integration in ASEAN. During this week's ASEAN Finance Track, as you will hear of various efforts to strengthen our economic cooperation. These include the ASEAN Power Grid. We're engaging with the private sector investors and also MDBs like the ADB and the World Bank on financing projects to transmit electricity from Vietnam to Kelantan via submarine cables and on to Singapore via on-land transmission lines. Expanding ASEAN payment connectivity. We currently enjoy digital payment connectivity between Malaysia, Indonesia, Singapore, and Thailand. Later today, we launch extending the payment linkage to between Malaysia and Cambodia with the ambition to cover the other nations in ASEAN. This will help promote intra-ASEAN trade and tourism, promoting greater economic integration to enable businesses to better leverage on ASEAN as a market to further grow regional champions in sectors including financial services, energy, healthcare, tourism, telecommunications, and logistics. Now, the Trump tariffs are not the first challenge to multilateralism, nor will they be the last. But if ASEAN can hold its nerve, staying open, pragmatic, and cohesive, it may yet be among the last believers in a world that works better when it works together. With that, I'm pleased to launch the ASEAN Simplified ESG Disclosure Guide for SMEs in supply chains. Terima kasih. Thank you. Sia-sia.
Thank you very much, Yang Amat Berhormat, for your inspiring speech. It has been an absolute privilege to hear from you today. We would also now like to respectfully announce kesejahteraan masa depan. Ayo seluruh anak pertiwi. Thank you very much. We would also now like to respectfully announce the departure of Yang Amat Berhormat Dato Sri Anwar bin Ibrahim. We would highly appreciate if everyone would rise in their places and kindly remain upstanding as we, of course, acknowledge the departure of Yang Amat Berhormat. Thank you all so very much, ladies and gentlemen. Keyakinan jadi ikutan, pendirian jiwa ihsan, nilai hormat keras diminda, daya cipta luar biasa, kesejahteraan masa depan. Ayo seluruh anak pertiwi, bangunkan Malaysia madani, sepenuh hati jiwa semangat, terus meyakini Malaysia madani. Ayo seluruh anak pertiwi, semarakkan Malaysia madani, sepenuh hati jiwa semangat, terus meyakini Malaysia madani. Peradaban kita bangunkan Once again, ladies and gentlemen, excellencies and all attending, we extend our heartfelt appreciation to young Ahmad Berhormat for gracing us with his presence and keen insights this morning. Kindly please be seated. Thank you all so very much for bearing with us. Ladies and gentlemen, before we move on to the next item on the agenda, we'd like to share a story about how tradition meets innovation and how Malaysia's creative and capital markets have come together in a powerful way during our time as ASEAN Chair. Let's take a closer look at the journey of Batik Lestari. And as of course, please allow us to arrange the stage for the next agenda on the item, but may I request for all eyes towards the screen to witness the journey of Batik Lestari.
Kita ni sebagai rakyat Malaysia ni seharusnya lebih mempromosikan kita punya craft batik ni sendiri.
Because the world should get to see this beautiful craft that is so phenomenal in Malaysia.
Kalau saya tak sambung, siapa lagi nak sambung kan? Rugi lah. Sebab kita dah ada semua dah. Kita hanya teruskan je.
Batik pada tahun 90-an, kita bermula dengan batik canting. Yang seronok pasal tentang batik canting ni adalah kita boleh mencanting mengikut cita rasa.
Sebab daripada blok batik ni kita boleh menghasilkan pelbagai corak. Istimewa dia memerlukan kemahiran yang tinggi lah untuk menghasilkan satu blok.
Benda yang saya guna tu semua tidak ada membazir. Walaupun benda-benda pun. Kalau yang banyak-banyak ni, saya tak pernah cuah buang-buang. Tak buang.
Lilin yang kita gunakan tu kita boleh recycle balik dan kita boleh gunakan semula.
Together, we work directly with groups of communities and artisans, largely in Terengganu.
Saya buat batik dah dekat 20 tahun dah.
Tak ramai anak muda yang berminat untuk join dalam industri batik ni.
Sebabnya yang ada sekarang pun orang lama kan. Yang baru datang lebih kurang 1 minggu, 2 minggu, dah tak nak kerja.
Kita nak kena atur masa, buat kerja. Kadang-kadang terpaksa sambung buat overtime.
Dalam batik, yang benda paling suka buat colour. Dia nak colour tua ke, nak colour muda ke, dia kena pandai baca.
The technical definition of batik is that it's a wax-resist layered method of dyeing fabric. We have to start even educating the consumer market on what is batik and what it isn't.
You know, the easiest way to tell like batik is handmade, you just like flip on the other side. If it's the same thing, if it's not white, like as if it's like printed fabric, then it is handmade.
Accreditations, I think, for any business are very important. We're actually the only batik brand in all of Malaysia that has an international accreditation for sustainability, and that's called B Corp. It's a global accreditation. I think when you're being sustainable, and you're trying to be eco-friendly about something, it's about steps you take.
To me, like the rest of the industry should look at the craft for, lessons about sustainability.
Saya Nur Atika binti Othman, pengasas kepada Fleur Batik.
My name is Muiz. I'm one of the co-founders of Inka and Kain.
My name is Amy Blair, and I am the founder and CEO of Batik Boutique.
Nama saya Ibrahim bin Rahman. Saya bermula daripada tahun 70-an dan syarikat saya adalah Ayu Fashion.
Nama saya Muhammad Khairi bin Mahmud. Saya sudah berkecimpung dalam bidang pembuatan blok batik ni sudah 20 tahun lebih lah.
Saya buat batik dah dekat 20 tahun dah. Orang panggil saya nama glamour Abang Jo.
Harapan saya sebenarnya saya nak tengok batik ni berada di pesada yang lebih tinggi.
And so our goal and our vision is actually to scale Malaysian batik all across the world.
Industri ini adalah industri warisan.
Kalau mari sini kita belajar. anak muda nak belajar batik, kita belajar.
Nasihat saya, kita teruskanlah dalam seni batik ni supaya letakkan pupuh di masa-masa akan datang.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for your time and so far. Kindly do remain seated as we will be proceeding with the next item on the agenda, which is of course the ministerial panel in a few more minutes. Thank you for your patience. Let's continue on with the second video. Thank you all so much. This continues the Batik Lestari story.
Batik Lestari is a collaborative effort between the Securities Commission Malaysia and also Microcreative Ventures Group, and we have planned this thoroughly with the objective to elevate and also empower our local batik artisans. We even go to the grassroots to find out about their challenges in the current market scenario. We hope that this Batik Lestari can help them to gain more exposures and also eyeballs, especially for the corporates to see that actually we have a very great batik products that they can purchase and also, for example, to be their corporate shirts for the entire company.
Pendapat saya untuk event Batik Lestari ni saya memang bagi superb. Baguslah kerana kita ada banyak pilihan-pilihan batik Malaysia yang kita boleh dapatkan dekat sini.
The Batik Lestari Festival in Securities Commission has been tremendous for Mokara, and my hope for the fashion industry would be to be recognized in the world and be relevant with the times. Therefore, I think innovation is very critical for the batik industry.
Announcing the arrival of Yang Amat Berbahagia Datuk Seri Dr. Wan Aziza, Dr. Wan Ismail.
InsyaAllah kita tingkatkan dan kita bagi promosi batik Malaysia ini ke satu kebanggaan untuk semua rakyat Malaysia.
Dengan rasminya kita melancarkan Batik Lestari Festival.
Hadirin yang dihormati sekalian, selamat datang ke Malam Batik Lestari.
That if Bank Negara can have an annual art fair, then SC can have an annual batik fair. So inshallah, you'll all be back next year. And with that, I all hope that you enjoy this evening.
For us, we have hit a great milestone with this strategic and meaningful collaboration, and also witnessed a great synergy between Security Commission and Microcreative Venture. I also would like to say that Batik Lestari is more than just elevating our batik. It's a manifestation that corporates and creative shall always converge and work together in the greater outcome for the nation.
Terima kasih kepada pihak penganjur Batik Lestari memberi peluang kepada artisan-artisan batik untuk terus memperjuangkan Batik Lestari.
For the future, Batik Lestari akan buat lagi competition macam ni untuk the new generation. Thank you Batik Lestari.
Banyak-banyak terima kasihlah kepada Batik Lestari yang menganjurkan pertandingan yang besar ini.
I think the
event went very well. I'm very proud to say that everyone had a good time. We had a lot of external visitors coming. All the vendors are happy that they make a lot of sales. And more importantly, we were able to connect to the corporate world. We hope that the youth will take a stronger interest in batik, as it's very important for us to preserve our identity and the industry as a whole. So please join us in the Batik Lestari movement. Love and wear your batik with pride.
Ladies and gentlemen, as Malaysia chairs ASEAN in 2025, Batik Lestari, as you've all just seen, stands as a proud example of how culture-driven initiatives can deliver real impact, supporting local artisans, preserving heritage, and strengthening our regional identity. We hope this initiative continues to inspire more cross-sector collaborations that celebrate who we are and what we can achieve together. And now, ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, I encourage everyone to take their seats as we are now moving on to our next highlight on the agenda, which is the Ministerial Dialogue Session. This is on ASEAN's structural macro policies, reforms versus expansionary measures, which will examine the delicate balance of shaping our region's economic trajectory. Now, this discussion will focus on policy strategies that enhance economic resilience, drive sustainable growth, and attract long-term investments. Joining us on this panel, it is now my absolute honor to call upon our esteemed ministers to join us on stage, beginning with Yang Berhormat Senator Datuk Sri Amir Hamzah Azizan, Minister of Finance to Malaysia, His Excellency Chee Hong Tat, Minister for Transport and Second Minister for Finance, Singapore, His Excellency Thomas Jiwandono, Vice Minister of Finance, Indonesia, and moderating this session is Ms. Avril Hong from Bloomberg TV. Thank you all. Avril, the stage is yours. Over to you.
Yeah, I was just saying it's really good to see the ministers. Welcome to this panel discussion. Please take a seat. I mean, it's really quite a week that we are having this meeting of ASEAN policymakers, and quite a day to be having this ministerial dialogue. I mean, just a day ago, we saw in the markets a gauge of stocks for ASEAN plunging by the most since the early days of the pandemic. We've come off a week of US tariff announcements, and somehow for businesses, it hasn't added much further clarity. We are not quite certain when it comes to the US president, the extent in which he wants to engage in trade deals. So amid all this, understandably, the worry for investors, for policymakers, is the global trade and growth shock potentially at a time when inflation still lingers. And also importantly, as we look at ASEAN economic integration drawing closer together, what is this near-term consideration going to mean for sustainable growth as well as attracting long-term investments? So with that, maybe I can just put the question to you, Minister Amir, first and foremost. Because Malaysia is advocating a coordinated response when it comes to tariffs, what would that look like given the varying rates of levies across this 10-member grouping?
Thank you, Avril. First and foremost, thank you everybody for coming for today's conference. I think when we first originally arranged this conference, the topic was a lot more calm and long-term sustainable, but things have surely changed over the last 1 week, right? So I think as we all have to adapt, I think ASEAN will also have to adapt as we move along. Fundamentally, when you look at things, when ASEAN was created, it was about promoting collaborative efforts as a bloc. And actually, we spent a lot of time to bring alignment in terms of political positioning, foreign position that we want to take. And over the years, we've been able to strengthen our economic cooperation within ASEAN. Yeah? Now, as the landscape in the world today changes, as the Yang Muhammad Prime Minister has suggested, yeah, the beginnings of protectionism, nationalism, and so on has begun to creep in to conversations along the way. Now, ASEAN has always been an open trading community. We've always stood by the fact that as the community can continue to trade, work together along the way, we can make pies bigger for everybody. A shared prosperity is a much better outcome along the way. While we cannot fully control what's happening outside from the challenges of the recent movements, but what we can do within ASEAN is better alignment within ASEAN. And in terms of better alignment, we would encourage ASEAN to focus about how do we make the cooperation within ASEAN stronger together. Focus about our regional comprehensive economic partnership that we actually have, and look at enabling more trade to occur along the way. And by doing that, and I think we can continue to create resilience within the system that we can manage. The second thing that the Prime Minister also focused on was actually making sure we expand the wings a little bit, and not just looking at what we can do within our own countries, what we can do inter-ASEAN, but also extend the ASEAN links across newer markets or older markets that we can step up along the way. And again, by creating better trade mechanisms and open trade mechanism and so on, and promoting that will allow us to be able to manage the changes along the way. And I think over time, we'll see the reflection backwards that we need to go and come back to an open, freer trade will come back into the conversation because it's always been something that facilitated the growth in the world.
It's really about greater integration among ASEAN members at a time like this. But Minister Amir, when it comes to the negotiations that are perhaps going to be underway with the US, what is the approach here? Are we, all sending respective delegates? Are we negotiating as a bloc? Can you maybe clarify that?
I think the intention of ASEAN is to make sure that the core principles are key things that we stand on. And so the core principles of what ASEAN stands on is actually we are core facilitators for free trade. We are core facilitators to talk about fair trade along the way, and to talk about how do we make things better by making the pie bigger. And that's the core principle. We recognize there will be differentiation. The stage of development of each ASEAN country is very different from each other. We are clear also that the tariffs that are being proposed also has differentiation along the way. But rather than focus purely at, okay, we must have exactly the same response, but what we should do is go back to the core principles. We welcome open free trade. We welcome to do more things along the way. We welcome the concept of active engagement to get to a better outcome. Yeah? And I think by doing that practical mechanism, we can hold everybody to move towards the same directionality.
Minister Xu, I see you nodding away. ASEAN works on a basis of consensus. How much consensus are you seeing on this?
Well, I think I first want to thank Prime Minister Anwar for his very good speech earlier this morning, where he outlined a few very key principles in terms of how we want to respond to this tariff set by the US, and how should we as ASEAN work more closely together. So I think first, just as Indonesia and Malaysia, Singapore also believes that the response should not be one where we retaliate with more tariffs, because that will lead to the risk of a global trade war, which is not going to be good for the whole world. But instead, I think we want to engage the US in discussions and see how we can clarify some of the concerns that they may have. And importantly, perhaps even more importantly, to look at how we can further enhance the economic integration within our region. So if I focus on that for a moment, I would say there are three moves that I think we want to make, and they all end with up, so I would say it's the three ups. The first up is, I think we should open up. Open up opportunities for our companies open up trade links, investment projects within ASEAN, open up also the flow of data so that we're able to support the growth of the digital economy. The second up is team up. And I think this is an area where we need to look at how we can further strengthen the collaborations that we have in our region, both bilaterally. So PM mentioned about the Johor Singapore Special Economic Zone. We also have good collaboration projects with Indonesia, Batam, Bintan, Karimun, and also the more recent one, which is at Kendal Industrial Park at Semarang. So these are all examples of how bilaterally countries within ASEAN are able to work together. But importantly, as PM Anwar said, we want to achieve a demonstration effect, how collaboration can lead to a better win-win outcome for all, and encourage more countries to establish bilateral or also multilateral regional types of collaborative projects. And teaming up can also be in new emerging sectors. So if we talk about sustainability, how do we drive more investments in clean energy options? How do we encourage the development of new fuels that will be needed? Sustainable aviation fuel, for example. We want to reduce emissions for global aviation. A key solution would have to be increasing the supply of SAF, sustainable aviation fuel, and that will require investments. So I think teaming up is the second important area. And the last one, if I may be a little bit more direct here, is that we need to speed up. Because we have been talking about some of these integration projects, collaborations, for quite some time. And maybe previously we may think that we have time, we can discuss, we can take gradual steps. But with this shock that came with the tariffs, I think there must be a greater sense of urgency for us to now use this to rally our people, our companies, to make these moves, to deregulate, to reduce trade and non-trade barriers, and also, I think, to speed up the integration. And if we don't do it now, then when? So I think this is something which I hope we can work closely together. It'll be difficult sometimes to get all the ASEAN countries to come in all at the same time, because as Minister Amir said, some countries may be at different stages of development. But that doesn't mean that we cannot start with either bilateral projects or with a grouping of certain ASEAN member states. We can start first, get it going, and others are welcome to join in later when they are ready. One example that I think we should give it a bigger push is the ASEAN Power Grid. Between Singapore, Malaysia, and Indonesia, I think we are working very closely on this. This is going to be an important initiative that can help all the ASEAN countries to achieve better energy connectivity and resilience because we provide backup for one another. And importantly, also encourage trading of energy that can then facilitate more investments into clean energy options. Thank you.
I would like the Indonesian perspective, but just before that, since you raised this ASEAN grid integration, how soon can we expect this? You talk about speeding up. How much further of a speeding up, Minister Chi?
Well, I think it's going to be difficult to have the entire ASEAN power grid all at one go because, you know, ASEAN, unlike Europe is pretty much a landmass. Ours, we are spread out. But what we can do is identify the grid in different parts of ASEAN. So we can start with different, more regional grids first, and then eventually try and stitch them up into an ASEAN power grid. But we've got to start where we find areas where such interconnectivity will be very mutually beneficial for all the countries involved. And we start to make those investments, and later on the grid can be connected as a whole.
So let's talk about trade still, because I think that is really the dominant concern for investors. When it comes to Indonesia, I understand they're sending a high-level delegation to Washington. What is Indonesia offering to the U.S.?
Okay, Avril, before I answer that question, I think it's important to define what the challenges are for Indonesia, all right? The tariffs that have been hit by the Trump administration is 32% for us. It's quite hefty, right? We are projecting a net decrease of Indonesian exports up to 2%, and possible decrease even in GDP, right? So it's quite real for us. Having said that, I'd like to echo what my colleagues are saying. That's precisely why Indonesia wants to talk about integration on the ASEAN regional setting, right? I think as far as the challenges, everybody knows it is challenging times. It is a given. The question is, what do we do about it, right? Now, echoing what PM Anwar has been saying, ASEAN has always been an evolution, not a revolution. And I think that's very pertinent in this day and age. That's precisely where ASEAN's strengths are. That is precisely why Indonesia feels that ASEAN integration is a key element in order to reduce those challenges for Indonesia itself. Now, in that context, yes, we are planning to send a delegation to Washington, D.C. The coordinating minister of the economy is leading that with respective ministries. We're still waiting for time. I think there's a lot of uncertainty even in D.C. as far as, who do we talk to, what type of policy makers that need to be gotten in touch. Just to give everybody here a bit of color, when you're talking to the USTR, it might be different than talking to the Commerce Department. So these are real issues that all of us have to face, and it is not going to be a one-off thing and trying to send a delegation and therefore negotiate. I don't think any of us in this room believe that that's going to happen as linear as that. So the complexity is there. I think the intent for us to send a delegation is real, but we also understand the complexities, and we also understand that the answers actually rely in this region.
Minister, you talk about some of the domestic challenges for Indonesia. The growth challenges, you say, are real. In terms of the support that potentially the government can provide, given the limited fiscal room at this moment, what are we realistically expecting at this point?
Let me try to address the perception that there is limited fiscal space to begin with, right? I think it's important to note, especially for investors in the room that are looking at Indonesia quite diligently, that our fiscal space has not changed. In other words, we're still projecting a budget about 3,600 trillion rupiahs. Our revenue is about 3,000, and our deficit remains in the 2.53 range. Nothing has changed. What has changed is a reallocation of the budget, right? So I think there's been a lot of misnomers in the public, in the press saying, oh, we're cutting the budget and so on and so on. That's not true. We're reallocating. The budget remains. So therefore, the fiscal, I think the fiscal prudence that Indonesia has always shown so far in the past decades remain. The Minister of Finance is coming tomorrow. I think she will be discussing this with colleagues from Malaysia, from Singapore, and from throughout the region. But I think as far as Indonesia is concerned, the fiscal condition actually remains quite strong. Yeah, it's a matter of, I think, using that reallocation for productive uses.
So fair to say that you are confident of keeping the budget deficit target 2.5% of GDP for the year?
Yes.
There are also concerns about, you alluded to this just a short while ago, that reallocation when it comes to the dividends for SOEs, right? How is state financing potentially going to fill a bit of that gap that's now going to the second sovereign wealth fund, Danantara?
Well, we are looking at our revenue streams very closely, right? I think we understand, commodity prices have weakened, and that's obviously there's impact to that. But we have, even before the past week, Indonesia has done a lot of structural reforms. The Ministry of Finance has focused on a lot of tax reforms. We are minimizing, for example, minimizing the tax audit process in Indonesia by half, right? All these things, I think, is in order for us to be able to focus on compliance for our revenue streams. I think it remains to be seen the results of that, but those reforms have been made, and I'm quite optimistic that they will produce the right results.
At the same time, it's been a bit of a transition from the spending on hard infrastructure for the past decade or so to the focus on soft infrastructure with the current administration, on education, on healthcare. How smooth are you seeing this transition, and what are you hearing from investors in terms of feedback?
I think, as far as investors are concerned, I think we do have to, Indonesia has to communicate better to investors. That's something that the government understands quite well. We hope to improve that. But mind you, this is our fourth month in office. Indonesia is a very big market, it's a very big, complicated country. We've been as an administration, we have been focused on internal cohesion. I think communication can be much better, right? But back to your point, Avril, about investments or the reallocation into soft. At the end of the day, what we are doing is investing in our human capital. And that is a good thing. It has to start now. It's a long-term issue. That's why we're focused on education, on nutrition, and that's where the government budget is primarily focused upon. It's to increase the level of human capital development in Indonesia, and I would argue that's a good thing for the region.
I just wanted to not comment so much on Indonesia, but to make a more general point that, we have these two objectives that many governments around the world will want to achieve. One is to continue to have sustained economic growth. That's important because that's linked to jobs, rising incomes for people, better quality of life. And then on the other hand, I think it's really to look at how do you then at the same time make sure that you hold the society together and not allow the divisive forces to be able to pull different groups in societies apart. And this is about strengthening the social compact, strengthening your social safety nets and your social support systems, including investing in human capital, in infrastructure, how to look after vulnerable groups in society. Now, if I may take a step back, I would say that in some of the societies, and perhaps maybe in the US as well, this is one of the reasons why we have what we have today. Because when there's growth, and certain segments of society feel that the growth has not benefited me, in fact, I've been left out, and the growth only went to certain small groups in society. It is not inclusive, it is not widespread enough, the tide is not lifting all boats. Then you have a pushback. Whereas if you embrace globalization, free trade, investments, and you translate that growth into tangible benefits for as many groups in society as possible, the growth can benefit a wide range of the population. Then I think you have the political and social support to continue with a pro-growth policy. So these two goals, if you do it well, they are mutually reinforcing. It's a virtuous circle. With growth, you have more resources. You can invest in your social safety nets. You can strengthen your social compact. And with that, you have better social cohesion, which then creates the stability for you to pursue pro-growth policies.
Lifting everyone at the same time, I think, is something that governments try to achieve, but it is easier said than done. you allude to this inequality. Cost of living concerns still weigh in Singapore in an election year. What will the government do if inflation flares up again, given this backdrop of tariffs and what that might mean for cost pressures?
So we have, in our latest budget, announced a series of different moves to help Singaporeans, Singapore families to be able to cope with rising cost of living. Now, to be clear, inflation has come down compared to a couple of years ago. But because price levels are still at quite a high level, and if you have a lower inflation, it doesn't mean that prices have dropped, it just means that prices are increasing at a slower pace. So there's still some catch-up for incomes to be able to match the rising prices. And so that's why we thought it would be useful for us to provide, because we have, I would say, a healthy fiscal position this year, to be able to provide some help for Singaporeans to be able to cope with the cost of living. But we also made it clear that this is not a long-term solution. Because in the longer term, you cannot solve the inflation problem by giving help alone. That is temporary, that is to cushion the impact. In the longer term, the more effective, more sustainable approach is to make sure that real incomes can rise, so that the increase in wages can outstrip the increase in prices. And you have a real positive real wage increase. And to do that, you need economic growth. And that is why, because now we are facing a more turbulent, more difficult external environment, we need to now look at how to cope with that, but also to look for new ways of growing, new engines of growth, new trade linkages. And as Prime Minister Anwar said earlier, ASEAN, this is a region where I think there's still a lot of growth potential, and we need to work doubly hard to make sure we enhance, speed up our regional economic integration.
If I can chip in on that side, if you look at Malaysian position, yeah, when we started this journey, we focused about how do we reinvigorate the economy, how do we focus about turning the economy around, but on a holistic basis. Therefore, under our term of the economy Madani framework, we talk about how do you lift the ceiling, we talk about how you lift the floor. The ceiling talks about how do you make the economy much more vibrant, how do you make the economy high-graded along the way, and in that process, talks about creating better quality jobs and stuff in the market. And in lifting the floor, it talks about how do you create better capacity for the citizenry to actually earn better income along the way. A lot of it goes back to job quality. A lot of it goes back to education capacity so that the citizenry can compete for those areas. And recognizing also not everybody will have the same opportunity sometimes, providing a social security net that can actually come in when necessary. So again, I don't think that game plan is going to change, because we need this game plan for the future of Malaysia in terms of restructuring it. Therefore, Malaysia's position, we understand that the tariff position is the challenge we exist today. We just need to figure out how do we navigate with the new complexity that's come in. And again, talking about market diversification, talking about integrating better within ASEAN gives us the capacity to create resilience. Right. Yeah. We're also talking about how do you create mechanisms that there's a little bit more self-sufficiency, self-resilience. And in the Economy Madani framework, what we've been able to do is actually activate our government-linked investment entities to actually reprioritize some of the investments domestically. So that creates a different engine of growth that can actually stimulate and provide a cushion during these temporary challenges that we actually have. So when we look at this, you've got to keep your eyes on the short term, the medium term, and the long term. You cannot just short focus and then forget the game plan in the future. That game plan guides us where we want to get to at the end of the day.
When it comes to this recalibration to still see strong growth for the likes of Malaysia, the forecast is 4.5% to 5.5% for this year. Can we still see above 5% growth for this year?
I think that there is a lot of efforts that is needed to look again. The reality is, yes, something dramatic has happened. Yeah? And to say that it will not affect the original plan is unrealistic. We have to address it's changing. Yeah? Therefore, activating new markets, activating inter-Asian growth is our counter to that. moderating the impact of what's challenge is coming in. So similar to Indonesia, that means active engagement with our US partners and making sure they understand and we are able to chip away at the issues at play so that we can get to a better outcome, a better landing. So I think that's the focus of all countries at this point of time, right? Find the balance, activate new areas so that we can cushion elements along the way. And the key is work at it, yeah? Use this as a catalyst to actually change forward and don't get, to some extent, what PM Anwar was trying to do was actually put in some optimism again and use this as a crisis that will force ASEAN to change forward for the better and building better resilience into our system.
When you speak of injecting optimism, I think a lot of the growth that's Malaysia's seen in the past year or so is also from US tech investments. How confident are you that these big tech giants, given the current uncertainties, they remain committed to their investments to Malaysia?
I think the reality, right, the first instinct of any investor is that when it's very choppy, let's slow things down while we figure out what's going to happen. And that's natural along the way. So then the question to governments and policymakers inside it, how do you actually begin to induce motion forward? So in the inducement of motion forward, you have to address the challenges that they actually have. Certainty of policy. You have to address the issues in terms of creating better other opportunities that they can deploy within the market. You address the certainty issue in terms of addressing long-term gains that they need to do along the market. Say, for example, if Malaysia aspires to high-grade its economy, build a better quality of industries coming in, investing in education-led things is the right, no-regret move. We will continue to do that because then it's talking about creating the seeds to continue to give the investors confidence that you have made the right decision, stay your course, and so on. Do we need to deal with the US in terms of their challenges in the tariff, the understanding to create a trading environment again that is useful? Yes, we do. Yeah? But a practical consideration while investing for the future needs to also occur.
Would you be able to share a bit more on what you're hearing from some of the tech giants in terms of how they're viewing, the investments in Malaysia or even the region?
I think when you look at the Malaysia space in the A&E and the semiconductor space, the reality is we've got a decent ecosystem that's actually running. We need to continue to keep the ecosystem running on that basis, right? So there is fear at this point of time, will tariff will artificially shift motions along that line. So how do you tackle the imbalance on tariff? The imbalance on tariff is partly handled by active negotiation with the US, but also bringing along the investor together with us to say, actually, do you really want to hurt your own entities that are actually in the market? Because we are providing a fair, transparent, and conducive environment for them to prosper along the way. It's not about just Malaysia causing the imbalance to the US. So I think there's a lot of redress in terms of making sure, understanding why this tariff approach was taken, and then removing the uncertainty along that line and giving confidence to the investor and also to the US in being able to do it. The second element is take control of certain things that we want. Yeah, so one of Malaysia's strengths at this point of time is financial liquidity in the market is very high. Our institutions are actually very cashed up. Yeah, and the ability of our institutions to work together from a private market sort of view to work with our local domestic ecosystem can also offer new things. So can we create a secondary ecosystem along the side so that we also are able to lift ourselves up along the way, not necessarily fully dependent on foreign direct investments also at the same time. So I think you cannot solve the problem with one magic bullet. You have to look at it at a whole range of things that you have to execute, but execute it well, you will have the resilience needed for the longer term.
When we talk about investments in capital markets, Indonesia's assets have really come under pressure this year. I'm wondering, Minister, what sort of discussions are you having with the likes of your colleagues at Bank Indonesia?
Oh, I think Bank Indonesia, as in the last, we've seen in the past 24 hours or 48 hours, they've been very active, yeah, vis-a-vis the rupiah. So we talk to them all the time, right? I think as far as capital markets are concerned in Indonesia, the regulatory framework, I may add, is there, right? We have what we call a financial omnibus law that was created in 2023. There's a regulatory framework in order to deepen those capital markets. Obviously, we can't do that by ourselves as well. It's also how we integrate with the other ASEAN markets as well. And I think that's something that needs to be considered very seriously. I think right now, with the conditions that are going around or the issues that are facing the world right now, it behooves us to make that a priority and talk to Malaysia, to Singapore about this. So I think I'm quite optimistic as far as identifying what needs to be done in the future. I think most of the countries in ASEAN, the ASEAN member states, have been discussing many things for whether it's the capital markets, whether it's the ASEAN grid, it's there, right? I think it's a question of how do we enhance that, right, Minister, or how do we fasten that? I would like to address what my colleagues are saying about ASEAN economic integration just a bit more, right? I think it's very clear that the intent is there. Within 24 hours, our leaders spoke to each other, right? As Prime Minister Anwar said this morning, the political will is definitely there, right? I think the challenges are about execution. It's about prioritization. And it's about finding what the links are as far as bilaterals or multilateral, regional, and whether it's in energy, whether it's in capital markets. But I think that's the next step that needs to be done, which is to sit down together and come up with perhaps a list, right? Whether it could be on a project basis in terms of sectors. I believe that our supply chains can be enhanced. Malaysia, for example, I think the critical minerals that we have in Indonesia can be a supply to Malaysian semiconductors, for example. Vietnam, the textiles of Indonesia might be able to link up with the garment industry. I mean, but I think right now, since things are changing so fast, it behooves us to also change as fast as what the problems are and create new opportunities.
Minister Chi, how are you viewing the current turbulence in stock markets? I mean, we saw just a day ago the benchmark plunged by the most on record. You shared with me earlier that authorities did not intervene to stabilize. How are you viewing all this?
Well, I think stock market, the price movements reflect people's concerns, investors' concerns about the real economy. So if you want to have a more sustained, more effective way of lifting the stock markets, you have to first of all address the concerns about the real economy, restore confidence amongst investors, provide the certainty for people to continue to invest, for businesses to continue to make those long-term plans. So I think that has to be our focus, whether is it individual governments within our own countries or regionally, to give confidence and stability for businesses to make those investment decisions. And then the other one I thought is very important is when we think about regional integration, put ourselves in the shoes of the investors, okay? These days, when people think about investments, it is sometimes, especially for big operations, they may not put all the operations in one location because they want to try and optimize where to put certain functions. So they may put some of the functions in country A, some in country B, some in country C, but then through the supply chains and through the digital control systems, they're then able to coordinate the operations for the company as a whole. But then they make full use of the competitive advantages of the different locations. Now, if we think about this as part of our plan for ASEAN economic integration, then just using as a microcosm of that, what PM Anwar spoke about, the Johor Singapore Special Economic Zone, that is actually what we hope to achieve. So instead of seeing this project as a zero-sum game, i.e. companies will move from Singapore to Johor or Johor to Singapore, and you're just shifting, reallocating. That's not how we see it. Actually, both countries see this project as something that can have a win-win, because we hope to be able to attract new investments that are today not here. But if they come, they may then want to put part of it in Singapore and part of it in Johor. And if we can then strengthen the connectivity, facilitate the movement of people and goods between the SEZ and Singapore, then I think we benefit both, both economies.
As you say, it's really about the ecosystem, but is it to say that at this moment, given the current ructions, that authorities are ruling out intervention?
You mean about the stock market? Well, okay, we will never say never, but I would say be a bit careful about regulatory interventions, because the prices reflect market conditions. And I think we would, of course, have safeguards in the system. But what is important, I think it's really to look at the fundamentals. And the fundamentals in this case is that the markets everywhere are reacting to this shock that is being introduced by the tariffs. And as Minister Amir said, after that, a lot of investors are holding back because of the uncertainty. So it has a first-order effect, but also a second-order effect in slowing down growth. So make no mistake, I think in the near term, I can't think of any country that will be able to escape the economic headwinds. So growth in the short term for everyone will be hit. And that's why the stock markets are reflecting that less optimistic or more pessimistic, higher risk kind of scenario. But it doesn't mean that we can't mitigate this or we can't get ourselves out of this difficult situation. But what it means is we have to work even harder to be able to open up, speed up, team up.
What would this mean for longer-term reforms? At a time when Singapore is trying to revitalize its stock market, do those priorities kind of take a bit of a backseat given the near-term considerations? Just very quickly, if you can.
We won't slow down our reforms. I think if anything at all, we should press on. The moves that we want to make are not looking at short-term changes, but we're really looking at how we can make our stock market more attractive, how to strengthen the competitiveness of our ecosystem as a whole. So we will press on with those moves, but we got to be realistic.
When can we expect the second tranche?
We have said that we will do so later this year. But the more important point is this: we have to look at the fundamentals, because you can change the attractiveness and the rules of your stock market, but if the fundamentals of the real economy, the global economy, remain pessimistic and investors have no confidence, businesses have no certainty, I don't think you are able to revive any stock market. To revive a stock market, it has to be tied to a revival of the economic prospects and the underlying economic fundamentals. So we have to fix that. That's, to me, a more critical focus. We've got to make sure that the world trading system, the investment ecosystem, and how countries work together, how we can continue to promote trade and investments by companies, I think that is going to be a very important and, I would say, key priority for all countries.
We have just a couple of minutes left on the clock, but I'd just like the ministers of Indonesia and Malaysia to, at this point, also weigh in when it comes to the growth priorities for Malaysia, for example. Obviously, a lot of that tech focus. We talked earlier about the integration of the digital economy. What else do you think Malaysia can do at this point?
Again, as I alluded to just now, the clarity of what we want to do for reform of the economy, that has not changed. Therefore, the economy Madani framework is clearly in place, and the execution through our NIMP, NETA program will continue to go at pace, because these are structural, fundamental elements that must be sustained. What we need to do is to look, like Indonesia is suggesting, like reprioritization of certain things, so that we can cushion the blow during the challenging period. Yeah. So, for example, if there was a way to activate a better market environment, whereby private markets in Malaysia are much more robust than they are today, suddenly we provided some liquidity into the market to allow businesses to thrive along the way. If we're able to simplify regulatory environment, yeah, and allow a lot of better ease of doing business, then competitively we are better stated than a lot of other people. If we're able to provide better infrastructure capacity, hard infrastructure, soft infrastructure, we will always look better in order to underpin investments coming in. So I think that's what Malaysia will focus on. Yeah, understand, of course, that in the reprioritization, certain things may take priority in terms of cushioning blows. Yeah, but you cannot delay reform. You cannot do the things that are necessary and say that can wait to a different period, because reform will secure the success of the country going forward.
Minister, when it comes to Indonesia, maybe some closing remarks from your end as well on this.
Indonesia sees various growth. We need to find new growth engines. That's a given. The current administration has been looking deeply into things. I think the need for food security is not just a domestic issue for Indonesia. Obviously, inflation in Indonesia is from foodstuffs, you know, so we have to be able to be resilient in our food security. But having said that, if Indonesia is successful, we can become a basket for Asia in general, right? So I think that's the intent. That also provides, obviously, labor opportunities. But we also are looking at things in the digital side, for example. So it's a mixture of many things, precisely because Indonesia is such a big country. There's no one sector that can actually push things through. It has to be a combination. I think we will continue on the industrial policy of President Jokowi in terms of downstreaming, right? That's also a very strategic initiative, and it will be continued under President Prabowo. And of course, we have to find other sectors that can provide jobs, right? I think manufacturing has been quite difficult in the past couple of years. It's a question of finding what other sectors can actually provide jobs for the big Indonesian population. Some people believe that tourism is a low-hanging fruit in Indonesia, with many multiplier effects and so on and so forth. So I think it's the current administration is looking at these engines of growth very, very succinctly. I think it was the first couple of months have been focused on the priorities of the president. The next half was to go to the investment community and say, these are our growth engines. But I think with what's happening in the world right now, it's also the third factor, which is, again, regional cohesion.
It's a period of transition. Ministers, it's been a real pleasure. I look forward to seeing more ASEAN integration. Thank you all.
Thank you very much, Honourable Ministers, for sharing your insights, and Avril, of course, for moderating that excellent discussion. May I ask that you all take a quick group photograph on this occasion. All eyes towards the camera, please, Honourable Ministers, as well as Avril. Thank you so much. Photographers, to the fore, please. All yours. Wonderful. Thank you very much. Now that that moment is captured for posterity, Avril, you've been wonderful on stage. Please do take your seats. As for our honorable ministers, may I kindly request for you to all to remain on stage, and of course, following our ushers who are going to lead you over to the left-hand side of the stage, your right, for those who are on stage indeed. Ladies and gentlemen, and our honorable ministers are still with us on stage as we are all about to witness a very exciting launch right here this morning with our honorable ministers. And also to witness the launch, I would now like to invite to join our honorable ministers on stage, Yang Berhormat Puan Lim Hui Ying, Deputy Minister of Finance, Malaysia, joined with Dato' Muhammad Faiz Azmi, Executive Chairman of the Securities Commission, Malaysia, and Ms. Carol Fong, Group CEO with CGS International Securities Group, who will be witnessing the launch officiated by our honorable ministers. Honorable ministers, you're all in position. And of course, allow me to give a brief background to the launch itself. The ASEAN Investment Challenge AIC is a flagship youth program to empower students with knowledge in sustainable investing and contribute to the building of strong capital markets in the future. Now, the AIC stands as a beacon for the future of finance, cultivating the next generation of responsible and knowledgeable investors. Beneficiaries of this ASEAN Investment Challenge will be tertiary students in 5 ASEAN jurisdictions, ladies and gentlemen: Malaysia, Singapore, Indonesia, Thailand, and the Philippines. And now, I invite our 3 honorable ministers to place their palms right above the globe to officiate the launch of the ASEAN Investment Challenge 2025. On my count, gentlemen, 3, 2, 1. And with that, the ASEAN Investment Challenge 2025 is officially launched. Ladies and gentlemen, we wish participants of the Challenge 2025 all the best and looking forward to the announcement of the winner later this year. Thank you very much once again to all our esteemed dignitaries on stage for officiating as well as witnessing the launch ceremony. Another quick round of applause, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much. Ladies and gentlemen, announcing the departure of Yang Berhormat Senator Datuk Sri Amir Hamzah Azizan, Minister of Finance to Malaysia, His Excellency Chee Hong Tat, Minister for Transport and Second Minister for Finance, Singapore, His Excellency Thomas Jiwandono, Vice Minister of Finance, Indonesia, together with Yang Berhormat Puan Lim Hui Ying, Deputy Minister of Finance, Malaysia.